Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the postgame podcast from a fantastic Timberwolves performance on Wednesday night, blowing out the defending champion Denver Nuggets by 21 points at Target Center. A well-balanced offensive performance from the Wolves, but the story here is the third time in 4 games the Wolves held the opponent under 100 points. They forced Nikola Jokic into an inefficient offensive night. We'll break down exactly how they got it done. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Thursday, everybody, and it is a very happy Thursday, a happy postgame podcast indeed. We're going to break down Wolves over Nuggets on Wednesday night. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves, or my account, which is at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right. Today at the show, this is the postgame podcast. So it's all Wolves Nuggets from Wednesday, a big 110-89 win. There's so many different places we could start. And I just want to kind of start with a pretty clear statement. Don't overthink this. This was just a well-rounded, solid, start-to-finish, gate-to-gate performance by the Minnesota Timberwolves. Save for like a brief third quarter blip where the Nuggets got things down to around single digits, this was a pretty much double-digit wire-to-wire win for the Wolves. They did lead wire-to-wire in this game. They never trailed. They got no double-doubles in this game, but solid performances from their stars. Rudy with double-digit rebounds, Catton and Oates both scoring over 20 points. They got solid performances from their next tier of scores. Mike Conley, 17 points. Naz Reid, 16 points. Defensively fantastic. They shot the ball well from the field, the Wolves did. They got to the line 27 times. This was just a really good, solid performance. And if you listen to the show on Wednesday, I said at one point, like, hey, this has been a weird first 3 games, right? Opening night's always weird, low scoring, sloppy, disappointing loss against a Toronto team that's probably a little better than people think, but, losing a winnable game. But opening night, right? And then you have the shorthanded Miami team that you start off slow, eventually end up blowing out. They're shorthanded, so it doesn't quite feel the same. And then the Atlanta game, lights out for the first half, the exact opposite in the second half. This was the most normal, like strong 48-minute performance the Wolves have put together through 4 games in an extremely painfully young season. But it was a full-strength defending champion team, albeit one that was 4-0 and is going to lose eventually, whatever. But no rest advantage for the Wolves in this game. Neither team played Tuesday. There's no real excuses for Denver other than they just had an off night. I talked on the previewing this game on Wednesday. Denver was leading the league in field goal percentage, I think top 3 in 3-point percentage, although they weren't shooting that many threes. They just were shooting the ball extremely well from the field, even though a lot of the peripheral numbers weren't all that impressive, right? Like they weren't getting to the line a ton. They weren't shooting a ton of threes. They weren't rebounding the ball particularly well, but they were just making shots. This was a bit of a regression to the mean for Denver. They shot just 39.6% from the field and only 18% from beyond the arc, and also only attempted 10 free throws in this game. But I want to give credit where credit is due, and that is the Timberwolves defense. I said on in my keys to the game on Wednesday, the Timberwolves had to come into this game making Jokic into a scorer, like what they tried to do in the playoffs last year. And to be clear, he's a 2-time MVP for a reason. They're the champs for a reason. He can beat you as a scorer. but he's less likely to beat you, or at least there's more opportunity for the Wolves to force an off night for the Nuggets offense if they're forcing Jokic to be a scorer and not a distributor. If he's distributing, the rest of the team's not all going to have an off night, most likely, right? If he's distributing, they're going to be really hard to beat, and he can still score if you start to play off of him because he's passing so much, right? But if you make him be a scorer, you crowd his space, make him feel like he needs to take you one-on-one, like what Cat did in this game and he did last year in the playoffs, you can have an effective defensive performance against Nikola Jokic, or at least you give yourself a fighting chance. Now, he had 25 and 10. Great, right? Well, it took him 23 shots to get 25 points. He was just 11 of 23 shooting, 1 of 6 outside the arc, only 2 free throw attempts for Nikola Jokic. 25 points on 23 shots. The Wolves will take that on the defensive side 10 times out of 10. Plus, the bigger stat, 3 assists for Jokic to 5 turnovers in this game. The Timberwolves made the Nuggets work really as a team for every single point that they got. And forcing Jokic to shoot 23 times and to have 5 turnovers and only 3 assists in this game is such a spectacular job by the Timberwolves. Again, tons of credit to Karl-Anthony Towns. Guarded him one-on-one for most of the time he was on the floor and made Jokic work. Cat got into foul trouble early too, and they put Nas on Joker. Joker scored a couple times on him. The Wolves had a really good plan, basically what they did in the playoffs, which was have Cat guard him. Rudy Gobert guards Aaron Gordon, but basically is playing free safety, right? Gordon ended up only playing 18 minutes in this game and didn't attempt a field goal until the third quarter. He was basically a non-factor, and that's what the Wolves were counting on. The Wolves were counting on making Nikola Jokic do something with the ball in his hands in terms of being aggressive versus just dishing to the open guy. Gobert played that free safety role extremely well. He ended up blocking 2 shots in this game, I believe both in the second half, but this was another case of him altering a bunch of shots early in this game too. And Jamal Murray didn't make a field goal until the third quarter. And again, huge props to the Timberwolves defense for that. Cat was physical, appropriately physical. Both of his first 2 fouls were relatively ticky-tack. And then he came back, wasn't in foul trouble the rest of the game. In fact, Cat didn't pick up another foul at all the rest of the game. He picked up 2 in the first 7 minutes, didn't commit another foul, but yet was still physical with Jokic. Set that tone early. They made Joker work, and they took away passing lanes and cutters with the length and activity of Jaden McDaniels, of Anthony Edwards, even Mike Conley. And it absolutely worked. Doing their best, playing in Jokic's space, and everybody else playing the passing lanes. It was the absolute best defensive play, and the Wolves executed it nearly perfectly. And as I said earlier, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work next time because they're really good and he's really good. But it gives you a fighting chance. It gives you every opportunity to invite them to make some of their own mistakes. And that's what happened in this game. A couple other really key positives from this one, Rudy Gobert related, Mike Conley related. And of course, I want to talk Cat and Ant too. They both ended up scoring over 20 points, but it wasn't smooth sledding exactly. Still, there are positives in non-perfect performances individually for these guys. So I want to talk about all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS, and it's simply you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. With basketball season here, you can pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. If the Wolves are playing on the same night as football, which I believe they play again on, maybe they don't play Sunday. I think they play Monday night, right? There's Monday Night Football next week. I don't know who the game is, but say Travis Kelce is playing, because why not? Everybody's talking about Travis Kelce. I can too. Say Travis Kelce, you could take more than 4 receptions or whatever that number is there, and you could take Karl-Anthony Towns more than 15 points. You could take a combo of 3-pointers made with Karl-Anthony Towns and receptions with Travis Kelce. Say it's 10.5. You could say more than 10.5 of that combination. You can also play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill, comedian Andrew Schultz, and more. There's community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each and every week. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. A big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, we will break down some bigger picture positives from the first 4 games. We'll peek ahead at what's a pretty difficult schedule. No game tomorrow night. They play next on Saturday against Boston. I believe Boston's the Saturday game, but 3 more games on this homestand. I'll look at the upcoming schedule, pick out my favorite matchups moving forward as well, and we'll preview the Saturday game too. That's all coming on Friday. Of course, we're daily Monday through Friday. Also, another programming note, we've decided the postcasts that are being hosted primarily by Luke Inman of Locked On Sports Minnesota and a rotating group of guests, mostly Jack Borman and Tyler Metcalf, both from Canis Hoopus. That is actually going to be posted. The audio will be posted in the Locked On Wolves feed. In fact, I believe the episode before this one, if you're listening to the audio version, the episode before is likely the postcast from after the game on Wednesday. You can still watch that postcast live on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube, so be sure to do that following the Wolves game Saturday night. Same deal, and I believe, again, it'll be Tyler Metcalf joining Luke over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on their YouTube channel. All right, additional positives. In addition to the Timberwolves defense, which, by the way, I want to talk more about this on Friday. 3 of 4 opponents held under 100 points. The Wolves came into the game with the 8th best defense in the league, according to most defensive rating, defensive efficiency numbers. That's only going to go up. You hold a team to under 40% shooting, 18% from 3, and 89 points. I mean, those numbers are only going to improve, right? So that's my number one takeaway. Was the plan perfectly executed against Jokic and the Nuggets as a whole. I mentioned earlier, Gordon didn't attempt a shot until the third quarter. Murray didn't make a shot from the field until the third quarter, finished with 14 points on 16 shots. I mean, like, hey, if Jokic and Murray are going to score 39 points, but need exactly 39 shots to do it, you did something right. I mean, that's what it was. 39 points on 39 shots for Jokic and Murray, and 9 assists to 8 turnovers combined between the two of them. Fantastic defensive performance from the Wolves in this one. Other positive takeaways. Rudy Gobert, once again, if you didn't watch this game, you glanced at the box score, you said, Rudy went 0 for 7 from the field. Yeah, okay, not great. He had 12 boards, 2 blocks, only 1 turnover, and did all of the Rudy Gobert things that don't show up in the box score. And that's a real thing. He was so good defensively, playing that free safety role that I mentioned in the first segment, and picked his spots perfectly to be aggressive and try and contest a shot, to just muck things up at the basket. I think it was like 3 of the first 4 possessions of the game, Gobert contested a shot at the rim and forced a miss. None of them were blocks, but he was there and he forced those misses. There were a couple of times the Nuggets scored at the rim when Towns was at the 5 and Gobert was on the bench. I mean, Gobert makes a real legitimate difference. There's no question about it. And he is nimble on his feet through 4 games. And I don't say that with a hint of facetiousness. Like, he's been legitimately, what was the word I used on Wednesday? I think I said spry, like spry, nimble, all of the above. Rudy Gobert has been fantastic through 4 games, and it was so good to see that happen once again in this one. I've gone too long without giving Mike Conley some props. Conley, apparently, I didn't know this at the time, but on Monday, Conley had food poisoning, was under the weather in Atlanta, and did not have a great performance. In this game, he was phenomenal. 17 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, 7 of 9 shooting from the floor, 3 of 4 from 3-point range, including a couple tough ones off the dribble. And the biggest thing about his performance was in the third quarter, when things got not quite to the level of dicey, but were threatening to get dicey, especially with Monday's game fresh in everyone's mind. The Wolves took a 19-point lead. Once again, 19 points at halftime. Took that lead into the third. The Nuggets got it down to, I believe, 11 at one point, 11 or 12. And then all of a sudden it was like Mike Conley and Jamal Murray back and forth, which was a very weird thing to kind of behold. But that's what happened. And Conley more than held his own, was the better of the 2 players, certainly in this game. And the third quarter was like all things Minnesota Mike. Like that's what happened in the third quarter. And somehow like 17-6 in 27 minutes for Mike Conley, a fantastic performance for him. Let's talk Ant and Cat. So I don't know. I thought they both played well on both ends of the floor. And there's a couple of ways we could take this. You could look at it and say, oh, Cat had 21, 8, and 4, decent shooting night ish, not super efficient, but okay. Ant had 24 and 16 shots. Oh, good. That's an efficient night. And just kind of move on. But they both dealt with some serious adversity in this game. And like, I get it. Nuggets fans would say, oh, the Timberwolves shot 27 free throws. Okay, sure. Well, 6 of them were in garbage time, Troy Brown Jr. and Shake Milton. So, I mean, we can go ahead and take those out, right? And the first half, like, this was just an abomination in terms of the way it was officiated. The Rudy Gobert hack across the arms in the first quarter was like one of the worst non-calls you'll ever see. There were several other bad ones. The missed goaltend on the Shake Milton shot attempt in the fourth. Cat got hit on the elbow, or at end of the third quarter, I guess it was. And then like a possession or two later, Cat gets hit on the elbow on the drive, doesn't get called. Like so many missed calls, bad calls, etc. I know the Wolves shot a ton of free throws, but Cat and Ant are notorious for complaining first and foremost. And also by allowing themselves to have their games thrown off by a perceived lack of foul calls on the opponent and a lack of free throw attempts. And they had every right to be upset in this game with the way it was officiated. But I thought for the most part, they handled it maturely. Ant got the tech early for clapping at the official, which like, just don't do that. I mean, just don't. They're going to call it technical every single time. Just talk to them like a person. Like just don't clap at them. That was bad. Besides that, though, I thought they both pulled themselves out of it, didn't allow themselves to get dragged down by their emotion or what they thought was getting the short end of the stick in terms of foul calls. And they both ended up with really good games. I mean, Cat was good on both ends. I talked already about how good he was on Jokic. It's hard to understate how good he was. And yet still the energy to be solid offensively. He again had like the second half burst where he was going to the basket more frequently. Actually got a couple of foul calls. Got lucky a couple of times. He didn't get called for hooking because it was pretty obvious he was hooking the defender. But there were a couple of cases where he did it and stopped, and then he was fouled, and it was the foul that got the defensive foul that was actually called. But he could have been called for some offensive fouls in this game. It wasn't at any point. So that was fortunate. But in general, a really strong performance. Cat, it took him 19 shots to get his 21 points. He was, again, just 1 of 4 outside the arc. But he did get to the line 6 times. He had 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals in this game, and only 1 turnover. Was a game high plus 22, Karl-Anthony Towns was. And that was in large part due to the Jokic matchup. I mean, Jokic was a minus 19 in terms of individual plus minus. But I was most impressed with Cat's, dare I say, maturity in this game. That's what I thought it was compared to what we so often see from Cat. And similar with Anthony Edwards. He had a much better night. We'll talk about him more in studs and duds in terms of his line and efficiency. Shot selection still leaving a lot to be desired. And that's a conversation that I think we'll probably also have on Friday's show. I think we need to talk some more about shot selection regarding Anthony Edwards. I'm sure Chris Finch would like to talk more about shot selection for Ant as well. So we'll do all that on Friday instead of right now. But my main takeaways from this one, the defense, specifically the playing against Jokic, also doing a good job with Murray, and just shutting down any. I mean, I even said Michael Porter Jr.'s name. Like he had 5 points and 11 shots in this game. Just a masterful defensive plan and execution by the Timberwolves. Rudy Gobert activity on both ends. Mike Conley stemming the tide in the third and just being an all-around professional. And then Ant and Cat and also Rudy avoiding getting into it too much with the officials. Cat avoiding foul trouble, etc. All those things very impressive in this game and paramount to giving yourself a chance to beat the defending champions. I want to close today by talking individual studs and duds and also taking a look at some of the broader box score stats, areas that the Wolves continue to be better in, defensive rebounding. We'll talk about all that here next as we close the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The World Series is unfortunately over now, but we've still got football action, Thursday night football. I tend to find myself on FanDuel when it comes to Thursday night football anytime. Also, Thursday night's great because you've got the TNT games, so you could take a look at the NBA action, the NFL action, get on there. I'm sure you can still have a win total bet on the Timberwolves. Remember, their line was just 44.5. I feel pretty good about them still striking the over or hitting the over on that, I should say. But the app over at FanDuel is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more, and it is still a great time of year between hockey, basketball, pro football, college football, the start of college basketball next week. There's tons to do over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off your NFL and basketball seasons. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, let's close this thing out with individual studs and duds. We'll start there. We'll get into a few more team stats. Studs, have to go with Mike Conley as one of the studs in this game. 17 points on 7 of 9 shooting, 3 of 4 outside the arc, 6 assists, 0 turnovers for Mike Conley, 3 rebounds and a steal, tied for second on the team with an individual plus-minus of plus 19. A fantastic bounce-back performance after a tough, apparently illness-affected performance on Monday in Atlanta. Was the steadying hand, and actually the steadying scoring hand that the Timberwolves needed in the third quarter when the Nuggets tried to make a mini run. A really, really solid performance for Mike Conley. I'm also going to give one to Anthony Edwards. We'll talk more about his shot selection on Friday, but he had 24 points and 8 of 16 shooting. And like, if you can shoot 50% from the field and drop 24 points, like, I don't know, we'll take that. Still too many non-paint twos. He was 2 of 4 on non-paint twos. If you go outside of 10 feet, throw in a couple more kind of deep, not quite elbow jumpers. And like in general, the shot selection still needs to be cleaned up for Ant. The decision-making needs to be cleaned up. But given the decision-making, he still ended up producing 24 points and 8 of 16 shooting, 1 of 4 on threes. You'd like to see him shoot more than 4 threes. 7 of 8 at the free throw line for Ant. So he did get to the line a lot more in this game, certainly more than he did in the first 3 games of the season. Only 2 rebounds. So he's had 2 strong rebounding games and 2 games where he had only 2 boards. So that's another area with some volatility that he's still struggling with. He did have 4 turnovers and only 1 assist, but he also had a couple of steals. One of them was really impressive. A couple of the turnovers really bad. I'm still giving him a stud because he did what the Wolves needed to do to win this game, and you need your star players to play like stars against a team like the Nuggets. The third stud, and that's a tough one. I'm actually going to split this one between Cat and Naz because they both were good defensively, and they both were good offensively too, frankly. Cat, as I talked about, wasn't super efficient. 21 points on 7 of 19. Like, that's not a very efficient night for Cat. But 6 of 6 at the free throw line's nice. 4 assists to 1 turnover, 2 steals, team high plus 22. And we talked about the defensive performance. Still a well-rounded game from Cat. Naz made up for the lack of efficiency in Cat's offensive game this time around and was solid himself defensively in this game, I thought. Occasionally matched up with Jokic, being asked to do a few different things. Naz has been impressive on both ends so far this year too. Offensively, Naz was the 6th man that the Wolves need him to be in this game. 16 points on 6 of 9 shooting, 1 of 3 on three-pointers, knocked down his first 3 once again. A perfect 3 of 3 at the line, 5 rebounds, an assist and a steal, only 1 turnover for Naz in just 19 minutes. So tracking the big man rotation numbers, or minutes, I should say, Rudy actually with the high of 32, tied for the team high in minutes with Ant. Karl-Anthony Towns played 31 minutes and Naz played 19 minutes. Those are all a bit shorter because we had about 6 minutes or so of garbage time at the end of the game. But a strong Naz Reid performance once again for the Wolves. Duds. I don't really have any glaring duds. I mean, I guess once again, Shake Milton just hasn't found a rhythm yet in a Timberwolves uniform. 2 points on 0 of 3 shooting, and they came in garbage time on a pair of free throws. 2 steals, 1 assist, 1 turnover, and a rebound in 18 minutes. Just an uneven performance again from Shake Milton. He did kind of get screwed over on that that goaltend, that the goaltend that was not called that should have been at the end of the third quarter. Just another uneven performance. Jaden McDaniels, not a full dud because he rebounded the basketball. He had 9 boards, second on the team in rebounds in this game, and a couple of blocks, was actually really good defensively in 21 minutes, but he was in foul trouble, made some head-scratching decisions later in the game. Not a dud, to be clear, but maybe not quite as clean as his debut was on Monday, although the 9 rebounds are super encouraging to see from Jaden McDaniels. All right, a couple more team stats. If you're watching on YouTube, I just threw those up. The Wolves shot 46% from the field. The Nuggets under 40%. Neither team shot the three extremely well in this game. It was a surprise to see the Wolves only attempt 21 3-pointers in this one. But, had the edge there, scored more both at the beyond the 3-point line and at the free throw line. So you look at it from a points perspective, which I like to do this. The Wolves they scored 6 more points than the Nuggets on threes, and they scored 19 more points to the Nuggets on free throws, 26 of 27 at the line for the Wolves, just 7 of 10 for the Denver Nuggets at the free throw line. They also only turned it over 13 times, the Wolves did, and they were a +4 in the rebounding battle, which has been an ongoing story this year. They came into the game as the best team in the league in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and I would imagine that stays the same. They had 47 rebounds in this game. They did give up 12 offensive rebounds to Denver. A lot of that was early in the game. Denver had a lot of misses, so there were a lot more rebounds available, which is why I'm not really sure on that rate, once it all gets refreshed after the Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights games, but to out rebound your performance in this individual game, that's the most important thing, out rebound your opponent in this individual game is the most important thing. The Wolves are a +4 on the glass, and Denver didn't do a whole lot with their offensive rebounds. They didn't exactly get a ton of second chance points. They didn't necessarily kill the Wolves on points off turnovers either. So in general, a really well-rounded performance for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and to turn in another strong defensive rebounding performance is super important. I should also note fast break points in this game, which has been a major issue for the Wolves. And, I've talked at length about how, hey, I said this on Wednesday's show, Denver doesn't run a ton, but teams know they can run on the Wolves. So I was wondering if Minnesota could still kind of suppress those opportunities for Denver. A smart, well-coached team may try and push the pace. They only had 9 fast break points in this game. The Wolves shut down transition opportunities impressively in this game, especially given, the challenges the Wolves have had trying to do that in recent years and so far this season up until this game. So a very, very impressive all-around performance from the Wolves. It's as simple as that. There wasn't really an area where you said, this almost sunk them. This was just a strong, solid start-to-finish performance for Minnesota. Things do not get easier, and of course, we'll talk about that on Friday's show. They host the I said Celtics earlier. It's the Jazz actually on Saturday. The Celtics, I believe, are Monday. So another winnable game Saturday. It'd be great to be 3-2 before the homestand gets tougher again next week with the Celtics and more. But we'll preview that that matchup on Friday's show. We'll preview the rest of the homestand and all that on the show Friday. And then, of course, be back Monday when we'll do a post-game pod following Saturday's game against those Utah Jazz. So that's all upcoming in the coming days here on the show. A big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, you can find this show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube, as well as the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken. You can see it on your screen there on YouTube, but it's 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder that you can listen to all Wolves games, that includes Saturday against the Utah Jazz, on the Wolves hometown broadcast with the fantastic Alan Horton on the flagship for the Wolves on SiriusXM on the SXM app. That Saturday night game is I believe a 7 p.m. tip again. Yep, 7 p.m. tip against the Utah Jazz. So check it out on the SXM app and join Alan Horton on the call. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Podcast Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.